Welcome to the Paradise Paradox. Thanks so much for joining me. You could have been anywhere in the world today, and you're here with me. I'd like to present this interview that I did with my buddy Juan Galt. So Juan is a cryptocurrency journalist and consultant. He's presented at Anarchapulco a couple of times. He also used to work on the Dollar Vigilante newsletter talking about cryptocurrency. And in this interview, he presents the case why Bitcoin is still important, why Bitcoin maximalism is a pragmatic position, and why Bitcoin is still a good idea in a market that's filled up with terrible propositions. So remember to check out Juan's Twitter. Juan's Twitter is Juan S. Galt. And if you have any questions about crypto, if you need someone to hold your hand getting into Bitcoin, setting up a Bitcoin wallet, Juan can help you out with your security. Remember to check out my new project, Cryptonomics, Principles of Cryptocurrency and Investing. So what I try to do with the new YouTube channel and podcast, try to jam as much knowledge and wisdom as I can into 10 minutes and show you how financial knowledge is so closely related to self-knowledge. So I hope you'll check that out. It's called Cryptonomics. Check that out on YouTube, iTunes, your favorite podcasting app, like the Facebook page. Thank you so much. Let's get into it.
How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. What have you been up to?
Europe.
Yeah.
Well, they kicked me out of Mexico. That wasn't a pleasant experience.
I remember.
But yeah, I learned a lot from it. And no, I traveled around Southeast Asia for a few months. Thailand. I was in a Buddhist temple in Thailand for a month. That was pretty cool.
What was that like? Could you speak to people, or was it like, were you part of the experience?
Sort of. So the reason I went there is because my friend is a monk there. And so I said, oh, well, I'll drop by, I'm in Bangkok. And he's like, you should come, stay. So I went and stayed for a month at the temple. So you might have heard of it, actually. It's called Wat Tam Kurbok. And it's famous because people get rehabilitated there for drugs, especially opiates. And it's reputedly the most effective rehabilitation for drugs in the world.
Holy fuck.
So they go there and they take this vomiting medicine every day. So you drink this stuff and it tastes like fish oil and motor oil mixed together.
Man.
And immediately you want to throw up, and then you go and puke in the lake. That helps with the cold turkey. That's what they tell me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. What about you? What have you been up to?
I've been traveling like crazy, man. I've been in like 25 cities this year, and right now I'm in Prague.
Right.
I've been hunting down a Bitcoin job. That's the truth of the matter. Like, I've been hustling for a long time, and I'm kind of getting tired of hustling. I just want to
Okay.
I just want to join a good company and do some good work and stuff, but I don't. I wanted to be a Bitcoin company or a Bitcoin first company, for many reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. And so I was in Toronto for a bit and Vancouver, and just kind of organizing some things and a lot of traveling. Yeah, looking for a place to chill. I kind of did the whole Acapulco thing, and that was it was a good experience, but I'm kind of done. I'll be back for the conference, but I've done it. I've done Acapulco. Yeah, check. Off the bucket list.
All right. Yeah. Well, it might change in a few years. The community there keeps growing. I guess we can always go back. Oh, well, I can't.
we certainly could go back. It's tobacco, just for the record. Everybody always think I'm smoking weed. It's like, no, man. I'd be a bubbling mess if I was smoking weed.
One's about to get Elon Musk.
Yeah,
I'm not even feeling it. So would you consider yourself a Bitcoin maximalist?
yeah. It depends what you mean by Bitcoin maximalist. To give you a stock answer.
Do you think that all altcoins will eventually be worthless or they won't have any substance in the long term?
Well, I wrote a Twitter thread pointing out that I believe maximalism, Bitcoin maximalism, it's a reactive, pragmatic movement. It's a way of raising the bar for a lot of these altcoins because 90% of them will not be currencies. That's just a given. They might be like some of them might become local currencies, maybe some of them might become like city-state currencies, some stuff like that. I could see happening. The vast majority will not become currencies, and they will not become certainly won't become global reserve currencies or global currencies.
But you think Bitcoin has a chance to do that?
Yeah, I think it's the only one that really has a chance. I think, it's possible Dash gets somewhere there, and it's possible Monero gets there to some degree, but the vast majority are not going to be there. Ethereum is not even trying to be there. And so these things are mismarketed, drastically mismarketed. And there's this incredible gap of libertarian thought in how to deal with fraud in the world. And the crypto marketplace is thriving within that gap of thought. There's way too much fluffy marketing, naive marketing, and the relationship between naive investing probably, and then I mean it's hard to say what people are doing. I don't want to talk for other people necessarily. Maybe people are taking calculated risks and putting betting money on these things, but in the stock market, a lot of the companies are like they're actually fairly regulated, and there's all these checks and balances, and you have to be very clear about what you're doing, and there's all these rules, and it makes it hard for you to actually go public, and that's actually kind of a good thing in some ways. Right now in the crypto space, there's and obviously there's bad things in the way that the stock market is regulated too, but there's an asymmetry between crypto companies and or ICO companies and investors, which is that a company will put together a really fucking shiny, colorful marketing sort of sci-fi campaign, and then thousands of people will throw money at it, and now this company has a bunch of money and no product, and so their hunger is gone, and they can totally exit scam, and they're outside of the legal system sort of, and so it's a recipe for failure. I think that I would have loved to see like ICO smart contracts that balance this relationship further, maybe like it built in with like time locks and like third-party escrows and kind of like stuff, like do some more sophisticated stuff, but that hasn't happened. And so right now the best we have, because as a grassroots sort of decentralized movement, we resist central enforcers, and so we don't want an SEC to be messing around with things. Then what the best we have is shaming, and the best we have is maximalism. And maximalism just says that most of these coins aren't currencies. They're not going to go anywhere. And if they go anywhere, it's not going to be currency status. It's going to be something else. And on top of that, they're even like anybody that's sort of been around the crypto space for not long enough will look at 80% of the altcoins and be like, what the fuck? These companies now have to jam this token in the middle of their company and deal with a ridiculous amount of customer service support because most people don't understand how crypto really works or what's going on. I mean, I see it. I help people figure their shit out on this fairly often. And so my position is very pragmatic. It's sort of like, listen, we got to raise the bar of legitimacy of the crypto space. You can't just launch an altcoin and leverage the credibility of Bitcoin. That's wrong. That's not accurate. It's not proper. And so we say that everything is probably a shitcoin, and Bitcoin is the only one that's legitimate, and it's the only one that has there's one thing that's really important in this is that Bitcoin was created in a selfless manner, as far as we know. Like nobody knew that this was gonna go get this crazy. Nobody really knew. Satoshi probably created it just because he could and because he was needed, but he didn't. It was an experiment and it worked, and it was kind of a miracle that it worked. And every altcoin since then has been created with the knowledge that it can work and make a shit ton of money, and that's why you see all these sort of like pre-mine scams and all this fluffy marketing, and they'll do like a pre-ICO or a pre-ICO, and then with the pre-ICO they'll raise money to do the pre-ICO, and then with that they'll raise money to do the actual ICO, and then all the first investors get to dump on the ICO people, and then good luck, you gotta wait 3 years before the product launches, if it launches, and then when it launches nobody cares because it's not It hasn't been hardened, right? It's just some sci-fi project. Like
Right.
if you look at Augur, right? Augur is like the oldest, probably one of the probably oldest Ethereum tokens that came out. I put money in it at the day, and it launched, and I was like, oh my god, it's gonna launch. So I bought a bunch, and fucking it launched. The price just like fuck, right? You think it pumped? No, it dumped, right? So there's so much speculation and hype and not actual innovation in the actual products. Yeah, so I think people need to like that's a I think it's a healthy reaction, but it's obviously it's a kind of a simple narrative, right? So the idea is like Bitcoin is the real, everything else is a scam. Like that's a very simple narrative, and every maximalist that I've met so far, it's funny how the conversations go, because you'll be like, oh yeah, all the shitcoins, say. It's like, oh yeah, so many shitcoins, ha 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 ha, and we'll just laugh about it. And then about 20 minutes later, so what's your favorite altcoin, right? And so we...
Yeah, but obviously
Yeah.
the answer isn't what you think is a shitcoin, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just we're starting from the assumption that everything is probably a shitcoin, but we all recognize, the people that I've talked to all recognize that there's a small range of possible things that are actually legitimate, and
Yes.
that's the ones we're looking for. But it's a counter to the hype that the cryptocurrency blockchain space is going to revolutionize the world. It's like, it's going to revolutionize a few things, and very few of them will actually do anything legitimately useful, and most of them are just it's a playground for people that are trying out the technology. And part of the problem is there's a lot of talent drain and a lot of attention drain going into these coins that have marketing teams and the whole thing. And the more talent that goes into Bitcoin, which is actually, much well developed, much more polished, much less buggy, the more talent and attention that goes to it, the faster we're going to get to an actual reserve status Bitcoin with a currency utility. Right now, it's not a currency because the upside potential is too high. Once we get to once the price stabilizes, once we moon and plateau, that's when the currency status happens. It's not going to happen before we get there because there's no incentive to spend. You just want to hoard it. It's hard money right now, and so
Right. But
yeah.
this is the thing. So different people have different ideas about this. So some people think that for a cryptocurrency to take off as a currency, it first needs to be a medium of exchange, and then it can become a store of value. But people who are really into Bitcoin say that, well, it needs to gain this store of value first, and then it can become a currency. But we don't really know which strategy is going to work, right?
Well, I think we've been trying the marketing thing for a while. I mean, no coin has more marketing than Bitcoin, and Dash has a professional marketing team. And as far as I can tell, it hasn't really caught any kind of currency status anywhere. They'll say that in Venezuela and a few places, like, there's like a lot of adoption in Venezuela. But in New Hampshire, yeah, have you been there? Have you tried it out?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, the marketing cost is
But it's not just about marketing. It's also about user experience. And as far as I can tell, Bitcoin doesn't have that. Very few coins really have that. I mean, the best user experience, I would say, is Steam. And Steam is still pretty lacking. Like, people go on it and they want to use something like Medium or Facebook, but it's not not quite that good. It's not quite that easy to use. For regular people, like, they see there's so many passwords and private keys and what the hell is going on, and if you lose it, then you lose all your money, and people are like, no, I don't want it.
Yeah.
The user experience just isn't there yet. So I do feel like we're still in this period of inflated expectations. Like, everybody hopes that it's going to become something great, but we haven't quite seen something that's really easy to use.
I know, I totally agree with that, and I also agree that Steam has had probably the best user experience as far as onboarding noobs. Fortunately, its USD coin isn't stable enough, and it's kind of a shit coin, and then everything else is pretty inflationary. But and it's also kind of centralized, right? But there's not much development happened on it since launch, right? It's just the same thing as they launched 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's still in beta.
Yeah, but they haven't developed anything. I mean, they've had 2 years and a bunch of money to keep building shit, and they haven't really done anything as far as I can tell.
I can't say anything that's really notable. There's nothing I can point to and say, oh, that's a a landmark innovation. So
Yeah. Yeah.
other than the fact that other developers are building on top of it, so you have things like DTube and DLive and even busy.org, which is basically just a different skin, but many people prefer it. So that improves the user experience.
Yeah, I mean, Steemit is an interesting example, it's kind of a black box. Nobody really understands what's going on, but the user experience is actually quite good compared to everything else. I think. I mean, no, I totally agree. I think the user experience of Bitcoin right now. I've been thinking about this lately quite a bit. I've been working with a company that's doing a lot of user experience stuff, and I think that the future of Bitcoin right now, as far as UX, is going to be actually kind of like the equivalent of financial service providers or financial service agents in the financial world. So you'll go to a bank and it's a nice building, and then some dude that knows his shit will walk you through the process. That's I think to some degree where things are going to go. It might not be exactly like a place, even though places like that have been popping up over the years. But it's going to be like you sign up for an advisory service, right? Some sort of premium service, and then they just kind of hold your hand through the process until you acquire a significant position, and then you have somebody to call 24/7 for support. And they'll help you set up your keys properly, and you have a good redundant setup and the whole shabam. Because the current wallet system, the wallets are the sort of the first introduction of Bitcoin to a noob. But beyond, I just set up some people yesterday, some tourists that I met here in Prague, set them up with some Doge. I sent them some Dogecoin, and they gotta write down this 16 word seed, and this girl's writing, and it's like, holy fuck, that's a big password, right? And I gotta kind of explain it to them, and then, yeah, okay, so that's where that is, and that's the best we've come up with, and there's some better stuff coming to some degree. The best that I see right now is a company called Casa, and Casa's doing a 3 of 5 multi-signature wallets on top of Bitcoin, and you don't have to deal with backups. So because you have 3 of 5, so you already have redundant security. It's pretty technical for people that I don't know it, but 3 of 5 is pretty good. And then Casa has one key, and then you have another one on your phone, and then you get, it's a premium HODL service, and so you get 24/7 support, but it's like $10,000 a year, and so it's a whale level security, and their hope, as far as I can tell, is to scale that to make it more accessible over time. But right now, that's where they're at, and that's, I think, where user experience needs to go, because this stuff is money. This stuff isn't like a social network account. This is money.
Yeah, but this is a thing. Like you have a credit card. You don't need how often do you really get support for your credit card? Like maybe once every 3 months, you call your bank. Or cash, how often do you get support for cash? Basically never. And that's kind of the level of user experience that people expect. Like Apple Pay or Google Pay, something that's really easy and really secure, and you basically don't need to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, so with a credit card, you got to go to a bank, and then you got to give them all your personal information. They got to do like a credit check and stuff, and it's fairly smooth. Like I got a bank account recently with a new bank, and you just go up there and you spend an hour with them, an hour and a half, and then they'll get all your data, and then they'll hook you up with a card, and off you go. And that's for debit. A credit card is a little bit, it depends on your credit score and stuff, can be a little bit trickier, but if you have a decent credit score, so it's pretty easy, and that's what we're competing with, right? And that's probably what it needs to be, if not easier, with the advantage that you don't have to go to a place. You can just have a call with somebody online or some AI service provider, and hopefully we get to that point. And then B, you don't have to give them any information. But that the user experience, I think keyboards and chatting is horribly just brutal, and any kind of password stuff, brutal. So people need to just be like, okay, well, you go to this website, you get a phone number, you call them, or you give them your phone and they call you, and it's some sort of AI bot. This is like in 5 years, right? Well, what it might look like. So the AI calls you, is like, hello, this is company X. You set up an appointment, you're interested in getting some Bitcoin and setting up a good setup, and you say, yeah, okay, great. So send us, give us your address, and we'll ship you four hardware wallets. You gotta pay us for them, right? However, here's some forms of payment, and then okay, you pay for them, right? Or maybe you already have some Bitcoin. If you want to pay for Bitcoin, you get the four hardware wallets, and then you download an app, and the app lets you set it up, and that would have to be fucking crazy easy, right? Like it's not like you gotta plug it in a computer and whatever. I don't know, right? Something like that, but you have somebody to talk to on the phone, and that's
Right.
the
But
human
here's the
experience.
thing as well. Dash has that human experience in Venezuela, and they're expanding through Latin America. So you can call up a Dash call center in Venezuela and say, "How do I set up a wallet?" And they'll guide you through it. They won't do it with a hardware wallet necessarily, but they can already guide you through it. So in terms of user experience, Dash has that. Bitcoin does not have that. So why do you think people will continue to go towards Bitcoin? Obviously, I don't think it's just about brand recognition or network effect. You think it's something beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like the way that the networks were set up matters, and the way that the stability of the networks matters. I mean, I have certainly concerns about the way that Dash works right now. I think that the masternode system is way too expensive. The barrier to entry is way too high. I question the distribution of the masternode as far as people go. I would really honestly like it's not to start shit, but people are like some Dash people are complaining about Core, saying that Core is not delivering. If Core doesn't deliver, if Dash Core doesn't deliver evolution by the end of the year, I would like to see a little civil war and see if they can actually fire Core. If they can fire Core, I would get bullish on Dash again because, okay, great. So they're not just controlling the system and pretending they're not controlling it. I would like them to get fired and then maybe try to get hired again. That'd be interesting. But right now, it's all kind of like, it's all language. Right now, we haven't really seen it tested.
Yeah. This is the thing about Bitcoin. So with Dash, at least potentially you could fire them. You could remove the funding from Dash Core. But with Bitcoin, you can't really do that. Or you would have to have like an alternate project, like Bitcoin Cash pops up and they fork it, and it's all very, very messy. So back to my question.
Well, hang on.
Why do I want to go with Bitcoin? Why do I want?
Well, let me address that because I don't think that's true. So Dash is very different than Bitcoin in that sense. So with Dash, the developers are getting paid from the blockchain, and that means a couple of things. So it means that there's no one kind of highly competent CEO type that can cancel the contract for lack of delivery, right? So instead, you have a diffused set of shareholders, of which Dash Core is probably like 30%, and they get to, and then you have to go through this pseudo democratic process in order to achieve that kind of accountability. And whereas with Bitcoin, there is nobody paying the developers. Not exactly. There's certain labs like R&D labs that are paying the Bitcoin developers, and a lot of the Bitcoin developers are just straight up holding Bitcoin and building shit. And so that is a very different process. And because it's like actually like legit open source, I don't know how open source Dash is. It's sort of open source. I don't know exactly what their structure is, and I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but because it's sort of more of a volunteer open source, old school open source sort of structure, then anybody can contribute as long as you can defend your code properly enough, right? So like you'll hear Roger Ver and these people say like, oh, like Gavin Andresen got kicked out of Core. Gavin Andresen was the first guy to actually have to get sort of the commit keys from Satoshi, and it's censorship and it's a takeover. Like, no, Gavin Andresen told the world that fake Satoshi was real Satoshi without being able to prove the private keys. If that happens, one of the possibilities is the CIA has a gun to your head, right? Like that's like if some random dude from Australia, not to say that there's anything wrong with Australians, that's just sorry. This scammer happened to be Australian. Shows up and says, "Hey, I'm Satoshi, and I'm gonna prove it to you this to you privately." When it takes about one tweet worth of text to prove it publicly that you're Satoshi Nakamoto, And you do that, and you have commit access on GitHub. Yeah, you bet your ass you're gonna get your commit access removed. That's what should happen. That's exactly what should happen. So I don't think core is being taken over.
But this is getting off track. My real question is, like, you agree that Steemit has a better user experience, and Dash at least has the potential to defund the core team, and you presumably see that as an advantage, right?
We'll see. Yeah, I think that. I mean, maybe. Yeah, I think in the case of Dash, that would be an advantage if they can do it. Yeah.
Right. But what are the advantages of Bitcoin? Why do I want Bitcoin?
Yeah, you want Bitcoin because Bitcoin was created with a kind of pure vision in mind. Like there wasn't a pre-mine, right? That's important.
Yeah.
There wasn't, and it's a simple system, right? It's a very straightforward system. Like most of these projects that have like that are not Bitcoin are actually more complex than Bitcoin because they're trying to do crazier shit. And so Bitcoin just is very straightforward system, right? You validate the transactions, you play the mining game, you can send, you can receive, and now they're building Lightning on top, and we can talk about Lightning in a moment.
Right, but we don't have a good user experience. We have this highly technical user experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So like, I think it's too early to try to do currency, frankly. But hold on, let me answer your question. So one of the things is Bitcoin has been around for a long time, and it's still working, and it's accumulated a lot of development talent, and it's gotten a lot of peer review on its open source code. And one of the interesting things that the Rose has been talking about lately is that because all these coins are open source, then the open source kind of space and all the innovation that's happening in all the altcoins actually works together. Like all the developments are being shared among the altcoins. So that's kind of good. It's definitely good, right? But Bitcoin is kind of the most polished and has the most talent, and it's kind of the most secure too. It has the most infrastructure. It has the most companies. So there's a lot of reasons. Its structure is still pure. Like if you can't change it, right? Like you can't change it for bullshit, right? It's actually decentralized. Like it's actually distributed. I think that's sort of the point, right?
We can break that down into several levels.
Sure.
Like obviously the blockchain is distributed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not decentralized, but distributed.
Yes.
Distributed ledger.
Yeah.
Then you're saying it's decentralized in the development because anybody can contribute to the code.
And there's a lot of developers and like 300 plus GitHub Bitcoin Core contributors. One of the numbers you'll hear. And so that's one of the things. Yeah.
Well, what are they working on? I don't know what they're working on. They're not working on user experience.
Well,
that seems to be very clear, and that seems to be to me that's like the most important thing, because we do have this technology that more or less works, and bringing it to the public must mean making it easy to use for the public. But they're not working.
Well, I think the difference here is priorities. So they're trying to. Okay. They're trying to scale it in a way that keeps its foundations strong, and that means doing off-chain scaling. And we can talk about that. The other thing that they're working on is privacy, and that's going to be the next big kind of debate and conflict in Bitcoin is going to be privacy. And Lightning actually adds a huge amount of privacy, right, to it. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's a massive improvement in privacy. And so those are the two things that they're working on, because they're thinking in a very long-term sense. They're thinking this needs to be global reserve currency. Therefore, it needs to be very private, because we don't want this thing to become an enforcement arm of some government. And it needs to be able to handle that kind of volume without undermining its fundamentals. And that means, and this is like, you gotta understand, like most of the development talent of Bitcoin is sort of either European or American. Right. I mean, there's definitely a lot of there's probably Asians, people from all over the world, but it comes from an American culture, and so there's an analogous to the right to bear arms in the Bitcoin world, and that's the right to be able to validate the blockchain yourself, because it's not about validating the blockchain; it's about counting the total supply. If you can't download a node to a consumer grade computer and run the verification process, then you can't actually know that the supply is limited. That's the only way you can know whether the supply is limited is if you have a computer count all the Bitcoins. That's it. And so if on-chain scaling gets out of the reach of the consumer, of the civilian market, then you end up with companies, and companies are much easier to hit. And so that's the mindset of the Bitcoin maximalists and the Bitcoin core community is no, we have to keep it. We have to keep it at the civilian grade hardware and bandwidth, and then we build things on layer 2 and layer 3 or whatever. And so I think the difference here is how soon is it, and the other thing is because these things have so much upside potential, it doesn't really work like cash. Like people have a counter incentive to spending it. They're gonna spend their fiat currency before they spend their crypto thing because they expect crypto to go up and cash to go down. So you spend the cash. And so it's too early. I think that, and this goes back to your question of is it all a user experience problem? It's like, well, part of the user experience problem is that there's a counter incentive to spend. And so right now it's a HODL. There are HODL speculative currencies or speculative assets. And once the speculative HODL mentality reaches its sort of peak, then we'll see the spending happen. And then we'll see a massive drive towards making spending easy. And I think that'll come, we'll see how Lightning develops on that. We can talk about Lightning, but I think that'll come once it makes sense, right? Once people are actually spending it. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to set up a local restaurant to accept Bitcoin. I tried. I set up a few, and nobody pays with Bitcoin. One dude every couple of months.
Yeah,
that's the reality.
So they forget how the mobile wallet works, and then they don't do it.
Yeah, there's no real demand for spending. The only people that spend Bitcoin are nerds like us.
Except in Venezuela and other countries where the currency is failing. That's where the demand is the highest. I
mean, that's what we hear, and I would like to believe that. I think I suspect it's something closer to they work for Bitcoin, and then when they got to pay their checks, they go sell some Bitcoin and they pay with cash.
Right. Well, a fellow on Twitter said that to me. He said that's exactly what he does. He uses Bitcoin as a store of value and then turns it back to the Bolivar and use that as payment because it's, obviously the Bolivar, for all its failings, it's still more widely accepted than any cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But, on Discover Dash, they have, I think it's 1,200 merchants listed. And I do think that there are probably a lot more small businesses, really small food carts and food stalls at markets and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So how much money? Let's do some math. So they have how many? 2,000 merchants.
1,200 that they've got listed.
Okay. So let's say it's 3 times that. So you have 3,500 merchants. How much Dash has Dash spent on marketing?
I don't know.
$100 million.
I couldn't say.
So $100,000 per merchant.
But say
right.
Maybe $50 million.
Okay, so $50 million at 3,000 merchants. Let's do some math.
Yeah.
Right? You get it. We're talking $30 million per merchant.
I see what you're getting at, but I think that's missing the big picture. Because one thing is, as an entrepreneur, you don't necessarily know what's going to work ahead of time.
Sure.
So you have to try things, throw shit against the wall, and then suddenly you get something which gives you a disproportionate reward. And that's what they've found there in Venezuela with the conferences, the call centers, and so on.
Sure. Yeah, sure. And so people can keep trying that. And I mean, I'm not against them trying it. I mean, really, the only reason I started fighting with Dash is because with some Dash people is because they're pushing the same narrative that Roger Ver is pushing, and that just pisses me off because it's just inaccurate. So for me, I've always said that Dash has a more stable system to do on-chain scaling because they actually have incentives to run a full node. In Bitcoin Cash, you don't have that. And I believe some Bitcoin Cash people were talking about implementing a Dash masternode system on top of Bcash. If they did that, things would change a bit. Certainly would change. But Dash is more stable for on-chain scaling than Bitcoin is and than Bitcoin Cash is. I'm okay with them sort of exploring and stuff. But if they're making false criticisms of Bitcoin, that's not good. I'm not gonna just put up with that.
Well, the Dash community doesn't really do that.
I
They don't really pay attention to what Bitcoin is doing, and they don't criticize Bitcoin. They
I
just
certainly see it.
do their own
I
thing.
certainly see some of that stuff, but
All right, fair
yeah,
enough.
but this is not, yeah, fair enough. I can't generalize that to everybody in Dash. It's just a few individuals, right? And so I just respond to them, and then, you know, um, and yeah, and I mean, I think we're picking the best out of most of them, right? And so I was thinking about this, like, what is Bitcoin? I think after the debate, there's this sort of question of what is Bitcoin in a sort of more metaphysical sense, right? Because you have the Bitcoin Cash people, right, who just forked Bitcoin and they're saying that that's Bitcoin, and we're like, no, that's not Bitcoin. And then they're like, what is Bitcoin then? And everybody's like, And I think maybe what it is it's whatever has 3 or 4 characteristics, and one of them is it's immutable. It's actually distributed from a human talent pool and from a topological and from a high proof of work perspective, and it has enough proof of work to be actually secure. There's this website that lets you see how much it would cost to do a proof of work attack on all the altcoins, and it's hilarious. Like, most altcoins, you can take them out with like a few $100,000. And so it's actually like secure, and it has an open source sort of kind of development process, and it wasn't pre-mined, and or at least the pre-mine wasn't completely egregious, right? Because you could say that like at least it had a fair distribution, right? I think that would be one of the things, and this is one of the things that Dash gets criticized a lot, because they had this like sort of insta-mine at the beginning that was ridiculous. Whereas with Bitcoin, you just if you know how to do it, you could do it. It was actually a fair distribution. And so there's like a set of characteristics that are Bitcoin. And interestingly enough, if you look at Litecoin and you look at Monero, Samson Mao and Fluffy Bunny and Charlie Lee are hanging out, and then you have Whale Panda, and they're all hanging out and they're friends and they have a podcast and they're all in the same groups, right? Even though there's 3 different altcoins there, right? So why do they get to be friends and not have drama like they have with other altcoins, for example? Even though the drama is not even that exaggerated, but it's mostly on Twitter. But well, that's because they all probably share some of these characteristics. So they had a fair enough distribution. I've heard some stuff about Monero's early distribution. I don't know any details, so maybe I'm wrong here. But Litecoin and Monero seem to have had fair distributions, and they share all these characteristics. And so they are within the spirit of Bitcoin, within the meta meaning of Bitcoin. And maybe that's where we're at. I don't know.
Okay. Well, let me put this to you. So you're saying that if in the future Bitcoin expects to be a currency, or you expect Bitcoin to be a widely used currency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But it is quite far in the future. So you're talking of at least 5 years before it lays these really solid foundations that you're talking about.
Maybe 10, man. I mean, I see. Here's what I see right now. I think it'll take at least another year for Lightning Network to start becoming. You start seeing it on the internet. Now, one of the interesting things with Lightning Network is that Twitter and a few other sort of Silicon Valley executives personally funded Lightning Labs. Lightning Labs is a sort of R&D open source. It was an R&D team, I guess, that's developing Lightning Network in an open source fashion. So all the work that they do is public open source code that anybody can use and fork and do whatever. But like certain Silicon Valley sort of OGs put money in it. That to me means that they are actually looking for a solution for internet payments on the internet, right? And so once this thing becomes stable enough, you might start seeing apps show up on social networks on the internet that let you move money around, and it's gonna be Lightning in the background. It might be branded as Lightning, it might not be branded as Lightning, but it's gonna be money. You're gonna start seeing like internet money just show up on the internet, and that's gonna build the FOMO for the next pump, for the next bubble, the next moon. And it's gonna be something like in the next 2 to 3 years, in the best case scenario for Lightning. In the realistic best case scenario for Lightning.
Well, are you saying like I'll log into Facebook and I'll just click the send money button and it'll be like, oh yeah, you want to send Bitcoin by Lightning?
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, it's gonna be something like that, and maybe it'll be like, yeah, it might be something like that. It might be like a Twitter bot. It might be just something you plug in, some Chrome application. I don't know. I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but it might be like maybe like browsers, maybe like your Chrome, like your Firefox browser will just boom suddenly has a Lightning wallet built in, and it's already connected to their Lightning node and a bunch of other nodes, and so you already have liquidity. And then maybe there's some new social network that starts paying people in Lightning for engagement, and now they have this balance, and they can start expanding and other things. So like this sort of spending payment processors will start to show up everywhere, and they're all just nodes in the Lightning network with different user interfaces and serving different clients. Yeah, it might be something like that.
Well, how about this? You probably remember in one of Andreas Antonopoulos' speeches, he talks about an analogy with the internet protocol, and once the internet protocol, which was in place, which was good enough, it became very hard to upgrade it. But what you did need was something that was good enough. And once you do have that, it becomes widely distributed. So it kind of sounds like Bitcoin is taking this other approach where they want to get everything just right before it's widely distributed. Is that right?
No, I think what's happened is that Bitcoin's layer one, which is Nakamoto consensus, right? Like this is the consensus, strategy that Satoshi Nakamoto created. Is called Nakamoto consensus. Technically, that's layer one. So that's the normal addresses that are like one. It started with a one, and then you can send. You grab somebody's address and you send, and it's proof of work and all this stuff, right? And then there's this sort of like 1.2 layer of consensus. That's SegWit, and this is a sort of soft fork layer of consensus that was built on top. And that was important to solve a few problems and to build a layer two. And so like layer one, it's already like really hard to change. Like it might have already gotten there. All the development that's happening is, I mean, it's still moving. It's still moving, but it's moving towards becoming ossified. And that's what Andreas Antonopoulos is talking about. Once something becomes rigid enough, hard to change enough, and good enough, people just say, "Oh, well, it's a rock. We can just stand on it." And that's where layer one is going. Layer two, like it was important to get SegWit in because with SegWit you can build a bunch of other cool shit, and you have it adds like 2.3 more megabytes worth of block space, and then you can do Lightning, right? And then you can do a bunch of other stuff, right? So the scripting language is a little bit more complex apparently, and you can add different addresses. So it was a big deal, but it's still built on top of Nakamoto consensus. It's still validated by Nakamoto consensus. You just got to download the version of like the SegWit version so that it can read the SegWit addresses, and then otherwise it just sees it as a pay to hash script. So it still can understand Nakamoto consensus can understand SegWit, but it can't verify the balances. It just sort of it sees like a special script, and then it works, right? You can get payments. I don't fuck that's gonna sound like FUD to people, but like it's like there's a miracle root of the SegWit transactions in the block, and then there's a pay to hash script. It's a technical thing. Bottom line is it works. If it didn't, you could hack a ton of Bitcoins on top of SegWit at any moment, and nobody's done it. So it works.
Okay, so SegWit is secure, so we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to drive at is, say with Dash is taking off in Venezuela. People are really using it, and we can see that it is good enough to get some kind of distribution and common use.
Uh-huh.
But with Bitcoin, the merchant adoption has dropped off in recent years, especially when the transaction fees went up and the transaction times went up. People stopped accepting it. Microsoft, Dell, they used to accept it. Now they don't.
That's the narrative, but I don't really know that that's true. Like, okay, so yeah, certain companies
well,
stop.
It is literally true that Dell doesn't accept it anymore.
And Steam, and Steam stopped accepting it too. No, you're right. You're right that there was an adoption reversal in Bitcoin. You're right.
Yeah.
I don't know how much adoption is actually like true in Dash. Yeah, maybe a bunch of companies say that they're accepting Dash, but they're probably getting money to say that and to get a BitDash wallet, and nobody's actually spending money with them. So like, if we could actually like get real data on that, that'd be fucking great. We don't really have good data. We don't have really academic grade data on this.
Independent data.
Huh?
Yeah. And we don't have independent data. The data we have is from from Discover Dash.
I mean, even if it was even if it was from them, like I haven't really seen like a detailed, credible report from them. Even if it was from them, I've only seen like sort of tweets and articles that don't seem to have like a academic grade research. And it shows so makes sense to me. Like I look at it, right?
That's the same with. I mean, when Bitcoin was. Merchants were starting to use Bitcoin. We never had academic grade data. We just had to kind of accept.
Yeah, and I think that we drank our own Kool-Aid. I think that it was all marketing fluff. I think that okay, so some of these companies accepted Bitcoin and they were dumping Bitcoin on the market, and then they got like 0.1% of their purchases in Bitcoin, but it looked as if they were accepting Bitcoin and as if it was being used, and not really. Not actually, even though you could use it, it wasn't really being used. And then when the fees went up, they got crazy and they were like, it's not ready yet. So they just got out of the way. And they're right, it wasn't ready yet. Like it wasn't going to scale. That was going to happen, right? Like the fees went up because people were trying to use it, and layer one just wasn't scaling, right? And that's what the whole debate was about. And so, yeah, I mean, no, it's a real shame, but like, yeah.
But here's the thing. So you think that, all these reports of Dash getting used in Venezuela are exaggerated?
Yeah, I think they might be exaggerated. Yeah, but I fundamentally don't know. I would love to know. I would really love to do like an in-depth sort of go and ask all my Venezuelan friends like the reality. And the thing is, like, I actually have Venezuelan friends, and they're like, like they're not that convinced, right? And so like I would love to go and like.
I asked my Venezuelan friends like a year or two, even 3 years ago. Oh, have you tried Bitcoin? And they're like, no, it's people here won't go for that. And I think there's still a lot of that mentality. But when the pain threshold gets to a certain level, people start accepting it, and I think that's what is happening. I don't think that's just marketing.
Yeah, something's going on. Something's definitely going on, and something's going on in Argentina and all these things. And I mean, I think it's good that they're being taught. They're being taught about crypto and stuff. But I mean, I'm also concerned that what if Dash fails, right? I think Bitcoin has a better likelihood of success, and if Dash fails, well, I mean, I guess people took their risks, and we can't stop them, and maybe we shouldn't try to stop them. But I just don't want Bitcoin Cash and Dash to be bad mouthing Bitcoin while they teach noobs. I think that's fucked up. And so if they're gonna say, listen, Bitcoin is really strong, but we are here to help you get on board, and you should do your investment research and all that stuff, and here's some sort of, like, if they were neutral in their marketing, okay, great. But if it's like, oh, Bitcoin's shit and we're better, and then they get burned, that's a problem.
Well, at least listening to, I'm trying to remember her name. I think it's Eugenia Alcalde or something. She's the woman who organizes the Dash conferences in Caracas.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. And she does seem to have that very neutral attitude. Like, she's like, well, I'm not going to tell you that this or that is perfect for you. You have to do your own research.
That's good. Well, I commend her for that, and I hope that more of that happens, right? And that's great. That's how it should happen. And I don't know that, and I'm not saying that Dash is doing the opposite of that, or that it's a common thing, but I've seen it sometimes, and I've seen it with like Dash Force. I've seen Dash 4 articles that are like, holy fuck, right? Like, this is just propaganda. And and I'm a little bit irritated at the guy, and so I'm probably gonna end up debating him at some point.
Who is it? Mark Mason, Joel, or
Joel? Joel.
Venezuela. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. In a way, that's their job, like tooting their own horn. But yeah, it's reasonable not to try to detract from other projects, of course.
Yeah, and it's really funny. It's really funny, the whole tooting your own horn thing. I was actually had a little conversation with Adam back at one point after I debated Roger Ver. He actually reached out to me on Twitter, which I was like, like, fight him back, since you a tweet. But so he was like, so what do you make of the Roger Ver? What's going on, right? And then we started talking about it, and it's like, with Roger Ver is a very competent communicator, very competent entrepreneur and marketing guy, but he is not very, like, his argumentation is not very profound. Like, he's like, I look at his argumentation and I'm often disappointed, but he's great at marketing and getting attention. And so he was on our side for years, and we were like, okay, waving them through, go, go, go. And we were reaping, we were benefiting from it.
Yeah.
But he was miseducating people. He was raising people's expectations of this thing working as currency on layer one, as if it was going to be like what it was, and that's not what it was, and that's where the conflict was. And so when Bitcoin failed to deliver with Roger Vero's marketing, that's when Roger Vero flipped, and now he flipped on us, and now he's talking shit about us. And so now we're frustrated, and it's like, yeah, that's what happens when you wave through a fluffy marketing guy, right? You gotta make sure the shit that he's selling is good,
Well, I try to stay out of that, like, coin wars, like people trying to debate which Bitcoin is the real Bitcoin. It doesn't really bother me. Like, let's let the market decide, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's and that's a fine position to take. I mean, my position is like I consider myself part of the market, and I will push for a decision, Yeah. so the market is people, So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the market will decide, and so yeah, that's fine.
Thank you so much for listening. Again, remember, check out Juan S. Galt on Twitter. If you have any questions about crypto, if you need someone to help you with your security, Juan S. Galt on Twitter. And remember to check out my new channel, Cryptonomics. Check it out on YouTube, iTunes. Principles of cryptocurrency and investing. It's going to blow your mind, open you up to the possibilities of how financial knowledge ties into self-knowledge. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.